name is Randy Richards, and I'm a Teacher Development Specialist. This is HISD TV. Today, we're going to be doing the math at home with an activity that focuses on describing and classifying three-dimensional figures based on their attributes. Before we begin, let's make sure that you have something to write on. A sheet of paper, a notebook, or a whiteboard will work just fine. For something to write with, if you have a pencil, a marker, even a crayon will be okay. Let's get started. Before we jump into our focus activity, we're going to do a daily routine and a strategy. Our strategy is going to help us organize information in a table. Let's get started with doing the math at home. Let's get started with our daily routine. We're going to engage in a fun routine that's called Shape of the Day. My son drew a picture that he wanted us to use in our lesson today. I wonder what he drew. It's a robot. Do you notice anything about this robot? I do. I notice that this robot is made up of two-dimensional shapes. What shapes do you see? I see squares. Did you notice squares? Let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. My robot's head is a square. My robot has 5 squares. I see other shapes that are a part of my robot. Let's count those and label them as well. I see rectangles. Let's count those. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. My robot has 5 rectangles. I also see triangles. Let's count those. 1, 2, 3, 4. My robot has 4 triangles. It looks like there's one more shape on here. The circle. Let's count those. 1, 2, 3, and 4. My robot has 4 circles. We have many shapes on our robot. I wonder if there's a way we can organize them by their attributes, such as their sides and their vertices. Now let's remember the names of our shapes and their attributes. This is going to be important when we move on to our strategy section. Let's move on to our strategy, which is using a table to organize information. So how do we identify two-dimensional shapes? Well, we look at the number of sides and the number of vertices. Those are the 2 attributes that we look for. So our vertices are where 2 sides meet. Sometimes I know we call these corners, but in the math classroom, we're going to call these vertices. Now let's get something to write with and let's see how many sides our shapes have. Take your paper and follow along with me. In your first column, I want you to write the word shape. In the next column, I want you to write the word sides. And in your last column, I want you to write the word vertices. Now that we have all of our columns labeled, let's go ahead and take a look at our shapes. So remember, when we looked at our robot, we saw there was a square. But how did we know that was a square? Well, we can count the sides. So let's do that now. Grab a color and count along with me. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. Our square has 4 sides. So let's fill in our chart. Now, let's get another color so we can count the vertices. Count along with me. 1, 2, 3, 4. Our square has 4 vertices. Let's fill in our chart. Now we also identified a rectangle. So let's count the number of sides that are in a rectangle. Ready? Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4. Our rectangle has 4 sides. Let's fill in our chart. Let's see how many vertices our rectangle has. One, 2, 3, 4. Our rectangle has 4 vertices. Let's fill in our chart. Let's move on to our triangle. Let's count the sides. Ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Our triangle has 3 sides. Let's fill in our chart. Let's see how many vertices our triangle has. Let's count. 1, 2, 3. Our triangle has 3 vertices. Let's fill in our chart. And finally, let's take a look at our circle. Let's see how many sides our circle has. Do you see any sides? I don't. Let's fill in our chart. What about vertices? Do you see any vertices in our circle? I don't either. Let's fill in our chart. I wonder if you notice a pattern in our table. Creating a table can help us organize and describe geometric figures. Now that we've reviewed our strategy, keep this in mind as we move into our activity for today. As mentioned before, our activity for today will focus on describing and classifying three-dimensional figures based on their attributes. This is a great time to get a blank sheet of paper. We know that using a table makes it easy for us to organize our attributes. So we're going to make a new table. So take your paper and follow along with me to make your columns. The first thing we're going to do is hold our paper like this. Then we're going to fold it in half like this. Then we're going to fold it in half again, this way. When you open your paper, you should have 4 columns. 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're going to label our columns. You will label them on your paper, and I will label them on my chart paper. In our first column, we're going to write name and draw. We're going to be doing a quick draw of each of our three-dimensional figures. In our second column, we are going to write the word faces. In our next column, we're going to write the word edges. And finally, in our last column, we're going to write the word vertices. Let's take a look at our first three-dimensional figure. Do you recognize this object? That's right, it's a cereal box. You may have had cereal for breakfast today. This is a prism. Let's look at the attributes of this three-dimensional figure. So if we look at our cereal box, what two-dimensional shape do you see? If you said rectangle, you're correct. This is a face, and a face is a two-dimensional shape that has straight lines. Let's count how many faces this cereal box has. So I have sticky notes that's going to help me keep track of the number of faces on my cereal box. You can put dots on yours, and you can count along with me. Here we go. Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 6 faces. What were the shapes of the faces? If you said rectangle, you are correct. This is a rectangular prism. I notice that this face has 4 sides and it is connected to another face over here. This is called an edge, where these faces connect. What we're going to do next is count the edges on our cereal box. Let's count them. I'm going to run my finger along each edge, and I want you to count along with me. Then we'll fill in our chart. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There are 12 edges. Let's write this in our table. So on our table, we are going to write the name of our three-dimensional figure. It's a rectangular prism, and remember, we counted 6 faces. We also counted 12 edges. The last attribute that we will focus on is the number of vertices. Vertices are the point where the edges meet. Let's take a look on our cereal box. Vertices are the points where our edges meet. Let's count our vertices and put a circle around each to keep track. Ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We've counted all our vertices. There are 8 vertices. Let's write this in our table. Now we have looked at all of our attributes. Let's complete our sentence stems. Here's our first one. The rectangular prism has 6 faces. Here's our next one. The rectangular prism has 12 edges. And here's our last one. The rectangular prism has 8 vertices. Now, let's take a look at another three-dimensional figure. This figure is a pyramid. Let's look at the attributes that identify this figure. Let's look at our figure. What two-dimensional shape do you see here? If you said a square, that's correct. What two-dimensional shape do you see here? If you said a triangle, that's correct. I have some Post-it notes that I'm going to put on each face of my pyramid to keep track and to count. Why don't you count along with me? 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got one more. 5. Our pyramid has 5 faces. What were the shapes of the faces? If you said square and triangles, that's correct. So this is a square pyramid. Most of the faces are triangles, and it only has one square face. I notice that this face has 4 sides, my square face. And it is a square because all the sides are the same size. Now, let's trace the edges and count them. But first, let's go ahead and fill in our chart. Our square pyramid has 5 faces. Now follow along with me as I count the edges. I'm going to take my finger and run it along the edge. Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Our pyramid has 8 edges. Let's write this in our table. And finally, the last attribute we want to look at is our vertices. Let's count the vertices. I'm going to point and I want you to count along with me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 5 vertices. Let's write this in our table. Now that we've looked at all of our attributes, let's go ahead and complete our sentence stems. So the square pyramid has 5 faces. The square pyramid has 8 edges. The square pyramid has 5 vertices. Now let's take a look at our last 3-dimensional figure. Do you know what this is? That's right, it's a can. But in the math classroom, we call this a cylinder. Our cylinder has 0 faces, 0 edges, and 0 vertices. Let's fill in our chart. The figure's name is cylinder. We know that it has 0 faces, 0 edges, and 0 vertices. So let's go ahead and complete our sentence stems for this cylinder. The cylinder has 0 faces. The cylinder has 0 edges. And the cylinder has 0 vertices. Let's do a quick draw of all our three-dimensional figures. So let's get something to write with and follow along with me. For our rectangular prism, we're going to start by drawing 2 squares. Then we're going to connect the lines, like so. There's our rectangular prism. Let's move on to our square pyramid. So we're going to start with a square. Let's draw a square. Then we're going to put a little dot in the top left corner. We're going to connect that dot to our lines. And finally, let's quick draw our cylinder. We're going to make a little curve at the top. Straight line down to this side, a straight line down to this side, and a little curve on the bottom. Now we're done with our quick draws. So today, we use tables to organize geometric attributes and to identify three-dimensional figures. We're getting ready to go through what we want you to practice at home. So parents, this is a great time to pause the video and get your camera so you can take a picture of the activity. Students, you will be identifying and describing figures on your own. So if you're a kinder student, this is going to be your activity up here. If you're in first grade, this will be your activity. And if you're in second grade, this is going to be your activity. We thank you for tuning in to Doing the Math with HISD at Home TV and encourage you to visit our HISD at Home website for additional resources. If you need additional support with today's activity, please reach out to your teacher. This is Randy Richards wishing you an amazing math day.